A couple of weeks ago, I made a video about the plans the Nazis had for the city of Berlin as they set about remodeling it as a showcase of all the best that National Socialism had to offer. And this included the grand plans for the Great Hall, which, had it happened, would have been easily one of the most ambitious construction projects ever attempted. If you haven't seen that video yet, there'll be a link in the closing credits and in the video description. The video attracted quite a lot of comments, but there were two recurring comments that particularly caught my attention, and they are related. One was that Hitler's dream would never have been realized because the Great Hall would simply have sunk into Berlin's sandy soil. And the other is that I forgot to mention the heavy load-bearing object. So in this video, I'd just like to address those points. But first, a few quick facts. The plan was to build, among other things, an enormous domed building, the Great Hall, big enough to accommodate at least 150,000 people. The top of the dome would have been 290 meters above the ground. And you are right to worry about whether the ground could take it. Berlin is famously built on very soft, sandy soil. And in fact, one of the best theories about the origin of the name Berlin is that it comes from an old Slavic word meaning swamp. That is one reason there are so few tall buildings in Berlin. The soft ground makes it difficult and expensive to build foundations that will actually take them. Traditionally, most buildings in Berlin are limited to a height of 22 meters from the ground to the eaves. And that was a limit that was set in the 19th century, so fire safety was another reason for that. Another planned building, which I didn't explicitly mention, was the Triumphal Arch, which was to be at the southern end of the north-south axis. It was to be 170 meters wide and 117 meters tall, making it roughly twice as wide and twice as tall as the Arc de Triomphe in Paris. Would that also have sunk? Well, that question actually brings me to the heavy load-bearing object, essentially a lump of concrete designed to test whether these big projects were even possible. And I didn't forget to include it. It was on my list of optional places to visit if I had time. But I didn't have time. The main focus of the video was on the question, what do the projects that the Nazis did manage to complete tell us about what Berlin could have looked like? The heavy load-bearing object was never intended to be visible. It was an experiment. I did visit it on a trip I made to Berlin 11 years ago, and that is where these images come from. It looks like a giant concrete cylinder with rooms inside, and that's effectively what it is. It reaches about 15.5 meters above the ground and is 21 meters in diameter. And that's already pretty big. This represents me standing next to it. But that is not all, because it actually extends more than 18 meters below ground. Weighing in at a total of 12,650 tons, it exerts a force of 12.65 kilograms per square centimeter, or for the scientists among you, about 124 newtons per square centimeter. It was completed in 1942 and simulates the force that would have been exerted by the completed Triumphal Arch. And for this reason, the rooms inside were equipped with monitoring devices to measure how the structure sank and settled. Unfortunately for the Nazis, though, the ongoing war meant that they never actually got the results of their experiment. Not until a couple of years after the war ended were the results evaluated, and the news wasn't great. The body had sunk about 19 centimeters and also had an overhang of 3.5 centimeters, meaning that it had also slightly tilted. Although the bottom of the structure reached past the sandy topsoil, what it was resting on was a type of glacial sediment called till, which is basically sand, clay, and random rocks, not nearly as stable as, for example, the lump of solid granite that is Manhattan. Would the arch and the Great Hall have been possible? In theory, yes, at least the arch, but only if the ground was first reinforced, which could have been done by, for example, injecting very large amounts of cement and lime. For the Nazis, this would have made the project more difficult and more expensive than they had anticipated. I suspect they might have tried, but I don't think they would have been able to achieve their goal of completing their capital city by the year 1950. The experiment itself was already horribly expensive, with construction costing around 400,000 marks. In today's money, that's over 2 million euros. And this despite the fact that a lot of the workforce was unpaid prisoners of war. But at least there was an experiment to make sure. Hitler's chief architect, Albert Speer, had already suspected that the ground would need a lot of reinforcement, and this just confirmed it. The heavy load-bearing object wasn't demolished, as it's too close to residential areas to make a safe demolition possible. In fact, it was later used for more experiments. It was already there. Post-war engineers made good use of it. It's now, though, a monument open to the public at certain times of the day with no charge for entry. In short then, Hitler might have been able to build his dream city, but given how difficult and expensive it would have been, he would probably have wished he hadn't. Thank you for watching. In the video description you'll find not only a link to the video about Nazi Berlin, but also one to a much older video about Berlin, which is a little outdated now but still very interesting.